Good morning, real life. I am so excited this morning to have the chance to share with you a little bit. But before I jump into my message, I have a couple things that I want to highlight. The first one is our dear friend Julie Sweeney is here with us this morning. And Julie, we love you. We have been praying for you. And it is so good to see your face in person and not just on Marco. So we're so glad that you're here this morning. If you have a chance to love on Julie this morning, go give her a hug. She's a hugger. We're so glad you're here, Julie. So, had to acknowledge that. That's super important. And then the other thing is I just want to take a couple minutes, if you guys are okay with this, and talk about camp a little bit. Camp is such a special week in a student's life. I was talking to some of the girls this week at different points, and this was my 25th summer at Lake Geneva. From a camper myself to then being a youth pastor for a long time. This month, you guys, it's the big 40. Oh, it's painful. I don't want to turn 40. But Lake Geneva is just a special place. And I could walk students around if they wanted to hear the journey of Miranda's walk with Jesus. And like, this is where God called me into ministry. This is where God healed me of the abuse I went through as a child. Just the different places on that campground where God met me. The different places where maybe I was injured a little during rec. Those are some things that happen too. But there's just so many things about camp that are so special. And it's always my prayer for students is that they would realize that camp is a week filled of moments. And they have the opportunity when they get away from all the things, you know, of normal life at home to have a lot of really cool moments with God. So a lot of times you hear kids when they talk about camp, of course, because it's fun, they think of the rec games and the crazy things that we do at camp or the crazy things they're asked to eat as a part of a rec game. And those things are super, super fun. It's fun to see kids, especially after not having camp last summer, just being goofy kids, right? See them laughing, see them having fun. But there's so much more to camp that I just want to take a couple minutes to talk about to help you guys all understand why we do it. Why in the world do we go to camp? And because everyone comes back sleep deprived. Poor Matthew Buell. As I'm outside holding his host team sign, just like staring off into the galaxies. And I was like, dude, are you awake? And he said, no. But why do we do it? We do it because of those evening services. Okay, there's something really special about the evening services when you're in a room for students. We had, I don't remember the exact number, but like 740-ish campers this week. So to be with 740 teenagers that are going after Jesus is really cool. And the speakers that we bring, man, we bring some really awesome speakers. And I think all of our students would agree this past week, Pastor Gabe, phenomenal. He's spoken to students' lives in a really cool, powerful way. So that's a big part of it. Why else do we do it? Man, we have morning church too. First, they play crazy. Morning rec, you guys, stresses my brain out because we're in the chapel and there's just children running everywhere. So yes, that's fun. But then after that, we were challenged by one of our Minnesota youth pastors that was our morning speaker. And then students break up into small groups. And that's a really great time. I'm so proud of our students. We do some things that aren't necessarily, like there's things that are required. Kids need to be at rec. They need to be at morning chapel. They need to be at evening services. But then there's lots of things that aren't required. So we have morning devotions at camp where kids get up early before all of their friends. If they want, they go into the chapel for devotions. And then during breakfast, they can go to campus leader training if they're saying, hey, I want to make a difference on my campus. So many of our kids went to that, which is awesome. Another thing they don't have to go to, but a lot of our students choose to, is See You at the Pole. All of you guys have heard us talk about See You at the Pole. We do it every fall, the third Wednesday of September. And the whole purpose of See You at the Pole is to get together and pray for your schools. You guys, this year, 426 campers got up early and went to See You at the Pole to pray for their schools. Pretty stinking cool. Another thing I love during free time, like this is like during like prime free time, so they could be running around doing anything. They don't have to get up early, but that free time in the afternoon is really fun because there's a lot you can do. But they also have Bible quiz. Every day, junior high, senior high, we had kids at Bible quiz. And they were so excited to be like, I quizzed out. Which if you know Bible quiz, that's a big deal. That means they're super, super smart at memorizing scripture. And we had kids there every day. And then the other thing that's super, super cool that I think a lot of our kids are really proud of, and they reminded me to make sure I told you guys, in one offering for Speed the Light, $56,000 came in on Thursday morning. One offering, a group of teenagers, $56,000. Junior high, $22,000. Biggest junior high offering that's ever happened at camp. And the cool thing is, out of the 3 weeks that have happened so far, there's one more week at camp this next week, $101,000 has come in for Speed the Light in 3 weeks to equip missionaries around the world. I think that's pretty cool. I don't know about you guys. That gets me a little fired up. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes just to explain why camp is so important, why you need to send your students to camp, kids camp, youth camps, because God does really cool things. There's something about, and for students, this is really, really hard, to give up your phone for a week. For me, I'm like, praise Jesus, take it. But for students, it's a big deal, right? To say, okay, here's my phone. I'll give it to you. And to get away from sports, from work, from all the things, and just get away for a week to hear from Jesus. It's really cool. It happens. We had some students filled with the Holy Spirit for the first time. We had some students called into ministry, one of them being called into missions. It's pretty cool. So if you ever want to talk camp, I could talk to you for hours. So please, just as next summer, I realize it's far away, but begin praying now about what God does at camp, because it's really cool. And pray for them this week. They have a lot of campers coming again this week. So God is not done at Lake Geneva for the summer. So that's a little bit about camp. So we're going to go ahead and jump into today's message, and it fits so much with what God was speaking during worship, I think, that I'm really, really excited about how God works and how God pieces things together. And the title of our message today is a call for ambulance drivers. So it's kind of a little bit of a weird title. I realize we're talking about like heroes of the faith, giants of the faith. But the reason I want to talk about a call for an ambulance driver, it's based off from a story on PBS that was aired a few years ago, an interview, about a conspicuous objector story. So there was this guy who wanted to go into the military, but the thing that was unique about him is that he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his bravery on the battlefield, but he was a conscientious objector. Does anyone know what that means? So he went into the military saying, I won't kill anybody. And somehow he got the Congressional Medal of Honor for his bravery. So when they were talking to the person's commander, they're like, what did you think of when you found out you were getting a conscientious objector? They were like, dude, it's a waste of time. Like, why is this guy coming in this military? Because part of military is we go into war, we go into battle. So he's coming in saying he won't carry a weapon and he won't kill anybody. Like, what good is this guy? Was kind of what he thought. Well, what this guy ended up becoming was an ambulance driver. Because again, there's very few roles, right, for someone who's going in the military saying, I will not take another life. So he became an ambulance driver. So his role is pretty important, right? Like he was bringing wounded soldiers back so they could get medical care that they needed. And there was this day where he found some people completely heavily under attack, and he kept going in, bringing out one soldier at a time. Okay, bringing in one soldier at a time to get medical care. There were 18 people there, and I believe, if I remember correctly, he was able to rescue 16 of them. But the last person that he went in to rescue, as he was going in, he himself was shot. So what this man did is he got down on all four, pulled this person over his back, and crawled him back to the ambulance. And then when he got to the ambulance, he put a tourniquet on himself, and then they went on. So the whole reason he got this Medal of Honor was that, how many think when you're just shot, it's easy to be like, done, right? Like, did my part, saved 15, did what I could do, but he pulled this man over his shoulder. Do you guys think it was painless to crawl to the ambulance as he himself was bleeding and shot? Probably not, but he did it anyway. And at the end of the interview, they asked him, what do you think of all this? Like, what do you think of what happened for you? You went in saying you wouldn't kill anybody. And here was his response from a quote. I just told the commanding officers that I was unwilling to kill anyone, but they never asked me if I was willing to die for someone. I was then and yet remain willing to die for my friends. Pretty cool story, I think, for someone who going into the military saying, I won't take a life, comes out winning this really cool Medal of Honor, and at the end of it saying, I never said I wasn't willing to die for someone. So again, I don't think this morning Jesus is saying, Tim, it's time for you at National Night Out. You're going to die for your neighbor physically. Probably not the case, right? Which we're thankful. Tim, we like you. we want you here. But that's probably not what Jesus is saying or what God is asking of us this morning, is to physically die for our friends. But when the world that talks about Christianity, right, like they view a lot of Christianity as hurtful, people have been hurt by the church, things like that, or they just don't know anything about the church. Here's the thing. We can be way, way, way far from perfect, and God can still use us. That's the cool thing. We don't have to be perfect. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, thou must be perfect in order for me to use you. It doesn't. We don't have to be. So today what I want us to talk a little bit about is our chance to be a spiritual ambulance driver, to be that for our friends, to be that for the people in our neighborhoods, to be that for our coworkers, that we would do everything we can to get them to the ambulance, and in this case, get them to Jesus. To get them to Jesus. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a man by the name of Samson. You guys cool with that? Because even if you're not, we're still going to talk about Samson. So I'm glad you're cool with it. So I want us to just take a look at Samson and just kind of his story, just so you guys know. If you don't, you can find his story in Judges 13 through 16. I encourage you to read the whole story. Samson was born to a man named Manoah, and a woman whose name was never mentioned, but the woman was barren. And it was kind of a big deal. An angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, for behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb. And he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. And that can be found in Judges 13, verse 5. In Judges 13:24, it goes on to say, so the woman bore a son and called him Samson. And the child grew, and the Lord blessed him. How many of you guys remember how the Lord blessed Samson? Kind of had like this superhero strength, right? Pretty cool. But here's the thing that we need to kind of point out about Samson to help us understand his story, is that as a young child, he made a Nazarite vow, which meant that he would vow to not drink anything, that he would not cut his hair or go anything unclean, such as a corpse. And you guys can read about the history of a Nazarite vow in Numbers chapter 6, but he made that vow, and it's kind of a big deal. It's a pretty big deal. And it was just between him and God, and because of that, God was able to say, I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to use you in really cool ways. And Samson was one of the most recognizable of the judges who ruled over Israel before the kings. But here's the deal. He broke a lot of rules, if you remember the story of Samson. Based on what we just said, he wasn't going to drink alcohol. He wasn't going to cut his hair. He wasn't going to be near anything unclean, such as a corpse. He broke every single one of those, right? He just straight up broke all of those. Samson was gifted with incredible strength, but he lost his strength because of who? Who knows? Delilah. Did you know that? Awesome. If you guys YouTube Tim Hawkins, he has a really awesome song about Delilah. I was going to play it for you today, and I just wasn't organized enough with camp to get that to Taylor. But look it up. It's really funny. But the cool thing is, at the end of his life, God restored his strength. But we're going to take a step back a little bit and take a quick look at some of the ways he broke his vow. Because again, he broke all of them, right? In Judges 14:9, he eats honeycomb out of the carcass of a dead lion he killed, right? First off, gross, right? But second off, he broke one of the rules. He said he wasn't going to be near anything unclean. And then later on, he attends a wedding feast where alcohol is present, and he kills 30 Philistines when he was tricked by his wife for a wager. We don't know for sure if he was drinking. The Bible doesn't really say. There's a chance, but he was definitely near alcohol. Definitely made a choice to kill 30 people, which isn't great. You know, he kills many people if you read his story. And then kind of the big one that every kid knows from kids' church, is Samson allows his hair to be cut by Delilah. I don't want to say girls are evil because I am one, but that was not cool, right? So he allowed himself to be tricked by this woman. So here's what happened if you kind of dig into that a little bit. When the Philistines found out that Samson had arrived in Gaza, they made plans to kill him. They're like, dude, we need to get this guy. He's too strong. Like, let's get him because he's after our people. Then something happened. Delilah entered the scene, and he fell in love with all the lords, or he fell in love, and what he didn't know is that all the lords of the Philistines had talked to Delilah and said, find out the power to his strength. If you do that, we're going to give you 11,000 pieces of silver. And she went, I can buy a lot of shoes with that. I can get my hair cut a couple times with it. I can do a lot with 11,000 pieces of silver. So here is the deal. She wanted to figure out, how can my people overturn the power of Samson? So she kept going to Samson and asking. The first time he said, that he could be bound with 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, and then secure them. What happened? Philistines came to attack him. He was able to break those bowstrings. The next thing he said was use new rope that had never been used to secure me, and that will keep me secure. Didn't work, didn't happen. He was able to break through those. Then he said, you can take the 7 locks of hair and web a loom, and then that will take away my strength. Did it work? No, it didn't work. So then she comes again. You love me. Why are you lying to me? Don't you love me? And what happened? He caved. That dude caved. He told her, if people, my hair's never been shaven. That's the secret of my strength. And then everyone, I think, probably knows. Do you know what happened, Eliana? He fell asleep, and they shaved his head. And he didn't know, so he woke up to the Philistines coming to get him, and what happened? He didn't have any strength. The Lord had left him, and he didn't know. And here's the deal. I think a lot of us can relate to, maybe not the exact set of circumstances. I really hope none of us have eaten honeycomb from a lion's carcass. But we've made other mistakes, right? We've maybe broken other vows that we've made to God and have made mistakes. And because of those mistakes, some of us may feel like we can't be used by God. We can sit in a service where we hear an encouraging word about, man, this week, let's love our neighbors. Let's love our communities. Let's love the people we work with. And then we get home and we go, man, I don't know that that's for me. I've messed up too much. Or I've made too many mistakes. Or the mistakes I've made are too big. And here's what I want us to look at is our key passage this morning is kind of going through the death of Samson. In chapter 16 of Judges, starting in verse 23, it says, Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer great sacrifice to their God and celebrate, saying, Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, I can't say that word today, enemy, there we go, into our hands. When people saw him, they praised their God, saying, Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste on our land and multiplied our slain. While they were in high spirits, they shouted, Bring out Samson to entertain us. So they called Samson out of prison to perform for them. When they stood him along the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them. Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof, where there were 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. When Samson prayed to the Lord, Sovereign Lord, remember me, please, God, strengthen me just one more time. And let me, with one blow, get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Then Samson reached toward the 2 center pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. Then he pushed with all of his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more than when he died than when he lived. Now you might be saying, what in the world does this have to do with being a spiritual ambulance driver? Hold on, we're going to get there, I promise. So here is the thing that was really, really cool about this, is that we often think, again, that we have to be perfect. Samson was not perfect, right? But God used him in a really mighty way still, even though he messed up a lot. And so what I want us to catch this morning, our first point is, ambulance drivers realize that their failure is never fatal unless they let it be. In Judges 21:22, it said, The Philistines gouged out Samson's eyes, but the hair on his head began to grow back. So his mistakes weren't fatal. His hair began to grow back. And remember, his hair is where his strength was. And God allowed his hair to grow back. And he allowed it to go back long again. And that Nazirite vow between him and the Lord, God showed up in a really cool way and continued to still use him, even though he was not perfect. As time passed with him in prison, his strength, his hair came back. And here's what I love about this passage, is it reminds us that God never consults our past to create our future. Never. He doesn't consult our past to create our future. You know what happens, though, is we consult our past. We consult our past and put limitations on what God can do because we go back to our past, but God doesn't. He doesn't go to our past. Even when we mess up, if we're humble enough to ask God for forgiveness, He forgives us every time. We just have to be humble enough to ask. Another thing that I love about this that just reminds me is our call is always higher than our fall. Again, because of God, our call is always higher than our fall. And what a lot of people call failure, what I call failure, you know what God calls it? Opportunities for growth and learning. Where I may say, God, I messed up big time. I'm a dope. He's like, no, Miranda, here's an opportunity for you to grow and an opportunity for you to learn and then become better. It's not like my opportunities where I fail doesn't mean I'm sidelined at all. It doesn't mean you're sidelined. It means God is up to something new if you let him be. And the thing I love about this, and this was even kind of in one of the songs we sang today, it alluded to this, and it takes a lot of pressure off from us, because I don't know, I might be the only person in the room, but I'm a people pleaser. Is there anyone else? Like, me on my own, I want to make people happy. I'm a yes man to the 10th degree. Like, I just want to make people happy. I don't want to let people down. And sometimes that can translate into my walk with God if I'm not careful. But the awesome thing about God is we never have to worry about letting him down because we're not the ones holding him up. We're not holding him up. He's holding us up, saying, you know what, Miranda, I'm never going to let you down. Just like we sang in that song, King of Hearts today. He's never going to let us down. And again, take that pressure off from yourself. You're not the one holding up God. You're not the one holding him up. He's holding us up. So again, if you ask the Lord for forgiveness, your spiritual hair will grow back. The second point this morning is that ambulance drivers occasionally have a holy anger, and the enemy wants to make a fool out of them and the people they love. In Judges 16:25, it says, "Call for Samson so we can mock him as he entertains us." How many people would that make you mad? For like, go get that Bruce guy so we can just laugh at him and mock him and have him entertain us. That's not cool, because it's not like they were like his friends and they're like, he's really funny, like he can tell some jokes. They were kind of like not super nice, right? And they wanted to mock him. And you guys have to remember that not only did people want to mock him, 3,000 plus people wanted to mock him. How fun would that be? Right? You're brought out into this area where there's that many people that want to mock you. Holy anger says, I'm not going to let Satan keep messing with me in the areas of my weakness or the people that I love. So when I think of holy anger, I think of like my family. I'm not going to let Satan mess with my family without me going into a fight with it. You know why? Because I believe God has a plan for my family. So I will pray for them. Matthew 11, verse 12 says, "The kingdom of God suffers violence, and the violent take it back by force." Now hear me out. I'm all about being a nice person and loving people. But I think that's where we need to make sure we understand what holy anger is. When I think of holy anger, that's what causes me to get to a place where I will not stop fighting for a generation of teenagers because I believe they have the call of God in their lives. And I believe that there's an enemy who is trying to sidetrack them every single day. Confuse them about their identity, and get in their heads and stop them from pursuing Christ. And that makes me angry. When I sit with students from our youth group or students I don't even know at camp, and they tell me their stories about their struggles, I get angry because I know God has something else for them. So that's a holy anger. Again, I think of my family. I get angry when I think about the way Satan attacks my family. I get angry about the way Satan tries to attack me. And it's not okay to just let those things go on without getting a little upset. Okay, so that fighting for the people we love, fighting for ourselves, even in Matthew 21:12, they talk a little, Christ had some holy anger. Do you guys remember what happened in that passage? He went into the temple. People were acting like it was a Walmart, selling their stuff. And what did Jesus do? He said, no, no, no. He had a little holy anger in that moment, and he flipped some tables, right? Because he had a holy anger. That is not what the temple was for. And here's what I want us to catch this morning is that hell fears when it sees even the weakest Christian on his knees. Because even in our weakest moments, God can do huge things through us. In our weakest moments, God can do huge things. I kind of feel like that's what happened with Samson. How many of you think he felt pretty weak? He lost his strength. He lost his eyes. All this stuff. Probably didn't feel like this big superhero like he had been in the past, right? Sin, and the reality is, what can get in the way of us pursuing that fullness in Christ for ourselves is sin. What can get in the way for people that we love in the way of them pursuing Christ for it with everything is sin, right? Sin can be fun until it traps someone. Then it's not so fun because they're trapped. And it's a lot easier to overcome sins when you look at it through God's eyes, right? Because again, when we make a mistake, when we sin, man, the people pleaser in me, again, I assume I'm done. This is the time God is done with me. And the cool thing is God is always like, no, I'm not done with you. We've been through this before, Miranda. And he still loves me as long as I seek forgiveness every time. He doesn't even hesitate. Yep, forgiveness. It's there. It's yours. How long has it been since you got holy anger towards sin in your life or towards sin in other people's lives that you love? We can get angry at it. It's okay. We should get angry at it. And again, this doesn't have to be something big and bad. I feel like when we hear the word sin, we're like, that's like the big, bad, ugly, icky stuff, right? Man, in my life, I'll just give an example. Something that I constantly have to surrender to God is the audio tape that I play over and over and over that I'm not good enough. Even that's a sin. Because when I say that, what am I saying? God, what you made was not good enough. That's not true. Right? So it doesn't have to be these big, horrible, bad things. Oftentimes, honestly, it's the little things that we sweep under the rug that actually have a pretty big impact on our walk with Christ. Get mad about those things, guys. Get mad that Satan can get us like that. It's okay. We have to remember, too, that sin will always take us further than we meant to go, and it will always cost us more than we ever meant to pay. So when we catch the little things, the things we watch on TV, the music we listen to, the conversations we have, gossip, all those little things, if we're not careful, man, we'll just get stuck in those things as a lifestyle. And that's not something that God ever meant for us to be stuck in. And sometimes those are the things that kind of stop us, right, from really pursuing Christ or really allowing Christ to use us. And again, cost us more than we ever meant to pay. Our third point this morning is that ambulance drivers have the guts to pull down pillars in their own life. In Judges 16:29-30, it says, "And Samson took hold of the pillars, which held the whole building up, and he pushed over the pillars with all of his strength." And here's what I want us to think about when we think of these pillars. Again, in this story, he went in, there's 2 pillars holding up this temple, 3,000 people all there ready to mock. And Samson was able to push on those pillars, and the pillars came down. But another analogy for pillars, if we look at it in our lives spiritually, is pillars are the placeholder where the enemy can hold turf in our own lives. Pillars are the things where we give the enemy that power to hold different areas of our lives captive. Jesus Christ gave his life so that we might experience everlasting life. He gave his life so that we could say, okay, God, today, place me right next to this pillar and then give me the strength to push it over, right? Because those pillars don't have to stand. And here's what I love. What happened with Samson in this moment is he recognized where his strength came from again. And he said, God, please, one more time, let me pull this pillar down. And God showed up in a real cool way. Samson got to that point where he realized, my life is worth more than this. My life is worth more than being mocked by 3,000 Philistines. My life is worth more. My question today for us, for myself, do we realize that our life is worth more? Our life is worth more than getting trapped in the pinwheel of sin. Our life is worth more than getting trapped in the pinwheels of the mind games that the enemy wants to play with us. Our life is worth more. I don't know about you guys. Man, I want my life to count for something. But in order for that to happen, we have to do what Philippians 2:12 says. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Because the reality is, you guys, we are free to ignore the commandments of God if we want, because we have free will. But here's what we're not allowed to do. We're not given the freedom to ignore the consequences. Those are going to happen regardless. We can't ignore those. So what is in our life that we need to just surrender to God? And that we need to just give to God and say, okay, God, I give you this. I can think of moments, actually had one at camp. As much as I love camp for students, I love how God shows up and touches leaders and counselors and the youth pastors that are there too. And I had this moment where I was like, God, I quit praying for healing for my own life, for my diabetes, because I just assumed that that's a cross I have to bear. And God in that moment said, Miranda, why can't I heal that? Why can't I? And I was like, I don't know. You're right, you can. And then I began to think about what pillars are in the way that cause me to forget that. What things are in the way where I forget the things that God has for me sometimes. And I think we all probably have some of those in our life, where we believe the goodness of God for all the people around us, but then when it comes to our own stuff, we're just like, whatever. But God says, no, it's not whatever. I have a plan. And sometimes when we walk through those things, we can look back later and say, how cool would it be for me someday to be able to tell someone going through chronic illness, hey, God healed me. He can heal you too. Right? So I just have to keep believing and keep believing and keep believing and not put up pillars in my way of seeing that and remembering that that's for me too. My biggest prayer for us today is that we would remember, like Samson did in this moment, our lives are meant for something big. Our lives are meant for more. Our lives are meant to count for something. So we have to evaluate, and maybe you're in a place where, man, you're thriving, awesome. That's phenomenal. By no means am I saying that everyone in this room is not in a place where they're thriving. By no means do I mean that. But we probably at different times get stuck, right? And I want you to remember Samson, a man who broke all the rules. Not just a rule, he broke all of them. Every single one. And then he remembered where his strength came from. And what happened? God showed up. So I believe that we are all called to be spiritual ambulance drivers. And that maybe today some of us are in a place where man, I don't know, I made all the mistakes. Be encouraged. Because when you look at Samson, he did too. And God still used him. And I believe that can be the same for our lives. That's not just for Samson. That's for us too. So we're going to pray. We're going to go into a little time of worship this morning. And you guys, I encourage you, every single day, just say, okay, God, take off the blinders. Like Brenna was kind of talking about, it's easy for us to kind of, when we're going through just the thick of life, which again, we have been, right? Is kind of take off those blinders. And here's the thing I love. This is what we tell kids at camp, especially when it comes to the baptism of the Holy Spirit. The goal is not to get something, right? The goal, with Samson, when I think of Samson's story, the goal is just to know God. And then things happen. Right? Yes, Samson's God, I want this. And of course, there's times where we want stuff, and that's okay. But just seek to know Jesus, and then things will naturally happen around you. It's a byproduct of getting closer to God. So it's not about coming to the altar saying, God, I need this, this, and this. And if it, for me, God, I need you to heal the foot pain I have from diabetes, and it doesn't happen, I walk away, oh, God doesn't have that for me. No, it's just about me coming to know Jesus more and trusting that in his time, it will happen. It's about trusting Jesus, that it will happen. That is one of the things, Julie, you were such an encouragement to me when we met right before your surgery. You guys, Julie just has had this peace. God is with me. God's got this. And the only way you get that kind of peace when you're walking through the storm is if you are close to Jesus. It's the only way. Otherwise, our eyes are on what? The storm, right? We're seeing all the chaos. We're seeing the hurt. We're seeing the pain, whatever our situation may be. But God is saying, turn from those things and just seek me. And trust that I have good things for you. And I love it. Samson in his weakest moment, God, just one more time. And what happened? God showed up in a really cool way that could only be Jesus, right? It could only be God in that moment. And I believe he has that for us this morning. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much that there's no mistake that we can make that would cause you to say, you're done with us. God, we thank you that there is always love and grace and forgiveness when we bring things to you, when we lay things at your feet. God, and I pray that every single one of us, myself included, those in this room, those joining us online today, God, that we would evaluate our hearts. And God, that we would lay things at your feet that need to be let go. And God, that we would seek you to identify the pillars in our life, and then also seek you to help us tear those down. But that most of all, God, we would just seek you to be close to you, and that we would trust that you have the rest. God, that we would trust that through our lives, you are going to reach the people around us because our lives are meant to matter. And what matters most in life, God, is not money, it is not possessions, it is people. So, God, the more we focus on you, I pray, God, that you would just help us to reach those people around us because we can tell them about what you've done in our life. God, I thank you so much for our church family, and pray, God, that you would just speak to everybody this morning as we end out our service. And God, that we would not go one more minute ignoring the pillars in our lives. In your name, amen.